2020 is finally gone. What a f***ing horrific year. And as 2020 ends, with it goes another year of mostly bad movies. I'm not a huge movie buff though, which means I've barely actually watched any of them. So much so that when I looked at the Wikipedia list of movies released in 2020 to find ones that I've seen, I only found 10, which makes it much easier for me to do a ranking video, I suppose. Bit of a misleading title, sorry. So without further ado, here is my list of every movie of 2020 ranked from worst to best that I saw. Let's get things started with the worst movie of the year. Trolls World Tour is a death sandwich. I don't even know what that means. But seriously, this thing is god-awful. The plot is basically the same as Infinity War in that the villain is trying to collect 6 colorful shiny things that they can unite onto one ultimate weapon in order to wield their collective power. But the whole thing about the strings being the source of the trolls' music makes no sense at all. Especially in that last scene when it turns out they apparently never needed the strings anyway. And likewise, everything they present about the history of the trolls and the different genre tribes and stuff is all stupid and dumb. And it's very clear that this movie had no intent, of course, other than making as much money as possible. Next you're gonna tell me that, like, the boss baby is getting us. Oh, for fuck. The writing is also even worse than in Trolls 1. I actually kinda like that movie, and that's because the dialogue and the character dynamics are well thought out, make sense, and aren't too over the top. But here, every line that comes out of Poppy's mouth is either cringeworthy or annoying. Yeah, trolls! The twist about the country troll actually being 2 guys in a horse suit was utterly ridiculous. There's absolutely no reason for this twist except for the audience, because Poppy and Branch didn't even know about the bounty hunters in the first part, so Hickory presenting himself as the yodeler would not have made any difference. The movie attempts to represent K-pop for some reason, and God, is it embarrassing. I looked on the cast listing on IMDb, and apparently each of the members of this K-pop gang has their own name, none of which are mentioned in the actual movie. That's so weird. Why not just name them like pink, yellow, green, blue, and purple? There, done. Who's gonna be like, hey, who's your favorite character from Trolls World Tour? Oh, well, I don't know, that's a hard decision, but I think I really like the character arc of Baby Bun. And why is K-pop its own separate category? The word pop is right there in the name. Is it suggesting that these trolls are like pop trolls but from Korea? Is there a Troll Korea? Trollria? But anyway, the K-pop trolls are supposed to be bounty hunters in Troll Universe, and Queen Barb enlists their help to catch Poppy and Branch so she can get the pop string. But my question is, what do these bounty hunters hunt in Troll World? It's not like in Star Wars where there's criminals running around 24/7. Aside from this movie where the circumstances are very specific, like, what do they do all day? And bounty implies that they get paid for their work, so like, how do they get paid? Is there money in Troll World? Is there an economy? The forced conflict between the 2 main characters that every animated movie has to do these days is completely pointless and wastes 15 minutes of screen time. The amalgamation of all the genre song at the end is really bad and impossible to listen to. In my opinion, there are too many callback lines that the movie wants you to take seriously and be impressed at their payoff, but instead make you S your H really hard. And the deeper message they try to convey about being yourself or something like that, it doesn't really matter, is just about as subtle as an elephant sitting on you. The only okay part of this piece of trash is Branch, who's the only one who's ever reasonable. If he wrote this movie, it probably would have been over in like 30 minutes. But Poppy is such an exaggerated, naive idiot that only makes things worse. Similar to what Disney did with Ralph and Ralph Breaks the Internet. For some reason, the negative qualities that Poppy had in the first movie are multiplied times 100. Guys, I'm really trying here. Try saying Trolls World Tour 5 times fast. It's really hard. Trolls World Tour is just nothing. This movie gets a 2 out of 10 for me. Hopefully Boss Baby Family Business will be a little better.
And now you work for me, boomers!
Oh, never mind. Please stop doing accents, Robert Downey Jr. It was bad in Sherlock Holmes and it's bad here.
Discombobulate.
Dolittle, let me first say, is beautifully shot. Any screenshot from this movie could be like a default Google backdrop or something. And from the trailers, you wouldn't be able to tell how stupid this movie actually is. Dolittle is an incoherent mess. The first thing that worsened my experience is that of all people they cast Robert Downey Jr. as the main character. Dolittle is supposed to be like a whimsical and magical character as I remember from the old stories. And the actor they decided to cast in this role was this guy, whose two most famous roles have been a quippy, sarcastic Marvel superhero, and
Discombobulate.
and I could not tell you why a single thing in this movie happens because it's all so vague and dumb. So Dolittle has to save the Queen's life by finding some magical fruit thing on a faraway island, okay. But the villain is this guy who went to school with Dolittle and hates him because Dolittle's smarter than him? Something like that. And he doesn't want the Queen to survive because I really don't know. Dolittle has to find that magic fruit thing, but first he needs to find the journal of his dead wife because, well, I guess she knew where it was, but never told him. Then there's an entirely pointless scene where this kid who tags along sneaks past some tigers, grabs the book, and runs out. But then the king of the palace he stole it from gets mad, but then he's not mad anymore. So what the hell was the point of inserting this character in if he never actually did anything villainous to Dolittle? Okay, then the villain guy, not the other villain guy, the real villain guy, he steals the journal, but then Dolittle, without the journal, locates the island anyway? So that means the last half hour of the movie was completely pointless. And the climax of the movie is Dolittle performing surgery on a dragon and removing a set of bagpipes from her, asshole. How was Dolittle qualified for this? And what, please tell me, was the point of any of that? I still don't know what the villain's motivation was to try and kill the Queen. I don't know why this one king guy was supposed to be important. And this movie did not need to be 2 hours long. They just didn't provide enough exposition to give enough stakes to what was happening. All in all, this movie does little for me. I never, for one single second, cared about what would happen to Dolittle. I think they were going for a story about how this cranky old man rediscovers his passion through this little kid, which is a common enough story trope, but the way it's executed here and how they try to make you feel emotional about Dolittle's dead wife, who, by the way, is never actually shown on screen, just makes you wish the movie was about something more interesting, like maybe the origin story of Dolittle instead. I would have loved to actually see the 2-minute exposition scene at the beginning as its own story, but no, we got this instead. 4 out of 10. Jingle Jangle, a Christmas failure. Oh, wait a minute. No, that says Journey, my bad. Jingle Jangle, like pretty much every Netflix movie and every Christmas movie, is so generic. It's your basic Christmas story about a guy who has no Christmas spirit, but then a young, spirited character restores their Christmas spirit. There are some cool things in it, sure, like the floating math symbols that they can make appear because magic exists, I guess, and the fact that it stars a mostly black cast where the fact that they're black isn't emphasized. But the colorful and fast-moving visuals could not hide the awful plot. The source of conflict in Jingle Jangle is that this guy, Geronicus Jangle, has his book of inventions stolen from him along with this revolutionary, liquid thing that brings toys to life by his own most trusted apprentice, Keegan-Michael Key. Keegan-Michael Key is motivated to steal them by this annoying Matador doll who doesn't want Geronicus to mass produce him because he wants to be one of a kind or something. And because Geronicus put all of his eggs in one basket for this revolutionary toy making product, having it stolen essentially bankrupts his toy business, and Keegan-Michael Key rises as the new most popular toy maker. Geronicus' wife, Jessica, dies, his daughter, Joanne, moves away, Geronicus turns his store into a pawn shop, his daughter has a daughter, and the movie finally starts when that daughter comes to visit her grandfather for Christmas. From this point, everything goes downhill. I probably should have mentioned this, but Jingle Jangle is also a musical, for some reason, and probably 2 of the songs are okay, and the rest are just awful and cringeworthy. The second song in the movie is sung by the granddaughter of Geronicus, Journey. I suppose that somewhere in their family heritage is a rule of only giving their children names that start with the letter J, and the song is not only bad, but it has more auto-tune than a Post Malone song. I was actually kind of liking Jingle Jangle up until this point, but this brought me back down to earth. Journey journeys to her grandfather's store, and Geronicus tells Journey to f*** off. But as it turns out, Journey possesses magical number writing abilities like her grandfather. In this movie, they try to introduce certain elements that they just want you to accept exist, and one of them is how they use certain words like spectacular and wonderful. as mathematical terms.
That's the circumference of spectacular.
Geronimo talks about the square root of impossible as the thing that makes his toys magical, which is glossed over way too quickly. Why do you not have time to explain what the square root of impossible is? And how does one single math equation make something work? Anyway, after Geronimo realizes that Journey knows a lot of math, he allows her to stay with him. She goes to the attic and finds a magical robot that can fly, but it can only fly when you believe in it. Journey sings an awful song called "The Square Root of Impossible is Me." What does that even mean? Keegan-Michael Key steals the flying robot to try and patent himself, and Journey tries to get it back. Geronimo goes after them, and there's a nonsense scene where they slide down a ventilation shaft, and are able to pass through the spinning blades of an industrial fan because math. Do not question it. For some reason, math is a very central plot point. That's basically the end. They get the robot back, Keegan-Michael Key goes to jail, happily ever after. There's also the completely and totally unnecessary part that this story is being narrated by an older Journey to her grandchildren, who somehow didn't know that they were related to a legendary toy maker, or that his factory was right outside their window. Everything in Jingle Jangle is stupid, for lack of a better word. I also forgot to mention that there's another pointless side character, this woman who has a crush on Geronicus, who is also extremely annoying and serves zero plot purpose. She calls him Jerry and is constantly hitting on him, and that's all she does. I know that the robots down at Netflix probably thought that what they did in Jingle Jangle was revolutionary and magical or something, but at the end of the day, it is yet another generic addition to the ever-growing collection of both bad Netflix movies, bad Christmas movies, and bad Netflix Christmas movies. 4 out of 10. For a better use of your time, I would recommend you watch The Princess Switch, Switched Again. Wow, I can't believe I talked about this for so long. Let's move on. I was surprised at how okay this movie was, considering the public's initial reaction to the Monster Sonic trailer. However, Sonic the Hedgehog is still not great. It is a monumental achievement in making a video game adaptation movie that I could actually bear, so props to Paramount for that. I actually like the design of Sonic that made it into the final movie, compared to the kind of stuff you usually get when you try to pair CGI cartoons with real life. It is pretty good. And Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik truly adds so much life to the movie.
Of course I want a latte.
Okay, I'm done listing positives, now let's talk about the bad stuff. Sonic is annoying, like really annoying. His constant banter and speeding around is supposed to be like cute or something, but it's just annoying. The brief origin story and premise they spent like 5 minutes setting up is so ridiculous. There was no reason Sonic had to come to Earth. Is there seriously nowhere else in his home dimension that Bird Lady could have taken him? The beats in the story that were supposed to be emotional just don't work, because they're directly preceded with scenes of Sonic running around and being a lunatic. So the parts where Sonic stops to lament, vocabulary word, about how he has no friends or whatever, seem more like a scene from a stupid YouTube sketch than an emotional dialogue that you're supposed to take seriously. There's a weird amount of product placement in this movie.
Apartments for rent I found on Zillow.
In the Olive Garden.
Because when you're there,
Your family.
Can you believe Amazon is gonna deliver packages with these things?
Make his a mellow yellow, please.
Call Optical Illusions. Tell them I need new frames.
Have you tried their never-ending pasta bowl? It never ends.
Just thought that was weird. And finally, the use of Sonic's speed is really inconsistent. Sometimes he's just normally fast, like as fast as a car, but other times he can just freeze time entirely. And when you realize he can do that, it's hard to take Dr. Robotnik seriously as a threat when Sonic could just freeze time for however long he wants. And that's everything wrong with Sonic the Hedgehog 2020. Oh, what's that? You want to hear the plot? That's not important. But if you really want, I can sum it all up in a few sentences. Sonic needs to go home. Teams up with Guy. Dr. Robotnik tries to stop them. Bad guy is defeated and Sonic decides to stay on Earth. There, that's literally it. I don't think I missed anything important, not that anything in this movie is particularly important. Sonic the Hedgehog is a nice old 5 out of 10. Onward is bad, but mostly by the impossibly high standards that Pixar's already set for themselves. I would happily watch it over any Illumination movie. Nevertheless, I don't like it, and let me explain why. First of all, I know that there will be at least one of you criticizing my decision to rank a Pixar movie only just higher than Sonic the f***ing Hedgehog. And to that I say, I initially thought it was good too. It was the novelty of an original movie after all these years that probably swayed my opinion. But take some time to actually think about the characters, the story, and the messages behind Onward, and you will see it for the painfully mediocre film it really is. It's hard for me to put my finger on, but something about Onward makes it feel like the least like a Pixar movie in the entire entire Pixar catalog. And by that I mean it just doesn't have the same vibe, I guess you would say, as something like Inside Out or Coco or Soul. Maybe it's the character designs and how they just look so weird and doughy, like an Illumination character. Maybe the weird juxtaposition, vocabulary word between magical creatures and modern technology distracts from the story that's going on. Maybe it's the pacing of how events unfold like an episode of Dora the Explorer. But the most likely reason of all is that Chris Pratt voices this guy. Side note, upon further research, I discovered that the role of Barley was originally supposed to be played by Jack Black. Just thought that was interesting. But yeah, a combination of many things ultimately made Onward feel really bland and boring. For one thing, like I mentioned, the way events happen one after the other is so badly paced. There's hardly any transition between scenes, like when Ian comes straight out of the highway car chase into their confrontation with the police, in one continuous timeline. To me, it kind of feels like each individual scene was planned and written in a different room by a different team of people, and so when they came together to assemble all the individual scenes they created, they had to scramble to make them all seem like they fit together chronologically. All the magic spells Ian uses have these stupidly restrictive specifics on them, like a growth spell that only works when you focus really hard, a disguise spell that only works when you don't tell a lie, and a spell that creates an invisible magic bridge but only works if you believe that it's there. What pattern do you spot here? Yeah, that the only reason that those restrictions are put on the spells is to play to Ian's exact character flaws and make him overcome them. Things like that in the movie just make it impossible for you to seriously believe that it's real. Onward is the first Pixar movie to include a gay character. Awesome, right? But chances are if you went to the restroom at the wrong time, you missed it. There was one line that established the fact that the character was gay. What a pathetic attempt at representing the LGBTQ community. That kind of thing just makes me really angry. And most important of all, the actual theme the movie explores about the bond between brothers is portrayed in such a bad way. Because Barley is nothing but an idiot the entire time. He wanted to take a longer, more dangerous path to the destination for no reason. He caused trouble for Ian while he was trying to do magic. He ripped the jacket, embarrassed Ian in front of his peers at school, and was the reason the gem thingy exploded and brought their dad back in half. And what does he get in return? Nothing. He never does anything to redeem himself besides give Ian one hug. And meanwhile, Ian hasn't done a damn thing wrong this entire movie, and he pays for that by giving up his once-in-a-lifetime chance to meet his dad. And the movie just plays that like it's completely fine and natural. I'm so angry at Onward for letting me down this much, and I would totally place it lower on the list if I was going based on my personal feelings alone, but considering all factors and not letting bias get in the way, I will reluctantly give Onward a 5 out of 10. I don't want to talk about this piece of garbage anymore. WW84, weird title, is okay, but let's just say that I would recommend the first Wonder Woman movie over this one. I kinda like this one, but it still lacks so much of the character growth, emotion, and badass Diana moments that made the first Wonder Woman such a treat, and one of the only 3 good DC movies in my opinion. I also think that most of the enjoyment I did get was more from the well-choreographed fight scenes and less from the actual story they were trying to tell about, like, the importance of telling the truth or something. Just a quick summary of what happens. It's now 1984, obviously, about 20 years after the first movie, and Diane is going about her job as a history museum worker or whatever, when she bumps into this lady named Barbara. They become friends over their interest in historical artifacts, and Barbara is presented by the FBI with a collection of artifacts to research and identify. This is where the main plot device is introduced. This f***ing rock that grants one wish to anyone who touches it. Yes, really. And the way they introduce it in the story is similar to the way something like the lamp in Aladdin is, but with one key difference. In Aladdin, the lamp and its powers were discussed and exposited earlier in the story, so that when you see the thing itself finally show up, you know what it is and it seems more grounded in the universe this movie's set in. But in Wonder Woman, Barbara just pulls a rock out of a box and Diana immediately says what it is, and immediately makes a wish on it. No exposition, no setup, or not even any sort of dramatic music to indicate what you're seeing is supposed to be important. And because every event in this movie hinges around the powers of this stupid rock, it's hard to take seriously. I know I've said that for every other movie in this list, but that's how silly they all are. Their excuse to bring Steve Trevor back, even though he died in the last movie, is that Diana wishes on that rock for him to come back to life, and he does, yay. Barbara also takes the stone into her office and wishes to be like Diana, because she wants to have Diana's confidence and influence, and yeah, you know where this is gonna go. But little do they know that there's a catch to making a wish on the rock. Once you make a wish, the rock gives you what you want, but it takes something in return, and that means that Diana begins losing her powers. While that's happening, this other guy steals the rock from her office and wishes to become it. He wishes to become the Rock, and so he gains the wish-granting powers of the Rock. What? Okay, whatever. I guess now this guy's a genie who can give anyone anything they want. That's not ridiculous at all. Anyway, Diana now has to stop Genie Man from destroying the world because the people's wishes he's granting are causing catastrophic things to happen, like the president wishes for an arsenal of nuclear missiles to use on Russia. And meanwhile, Barbara realizes that she's gaining Diana's strength from the wish she made to be like her, which I think is utterly ridiculous because it seems ridiculous that the wishes can be so open to interpretation like that. Anyway, Barbara becomes really strong while Diana becomes weaker, and Barbara promises to protect Genie Man because without him, she wouldn't have any powers. The way her character goes from awkward, nervous woman to aggressive supervillain is just way too fast. Because Genie Man wants to grant as many wishes as possible because it makes him stronger, but he can only grant someone's wish if he's touching them, Genie Man's master plan is to use government satellites to grant the wishes of everyone in the world at the same time because the satellites can cast television beams that touch everything. Bit of a stretch there. The final fight scene between Wonder Woman and Barbara, who now looks like a character from the Cats movie, how, not important, is the most epic thing I've ever seen. Wow, look at him swing around. According to the wiki fandom, Barbara is supposed to be Cheetah, who is a pre-established Wonder Woman villain, but if this movie is the origin story for Cheetah, it does a pretty lame job of developing her as a serious threat. She's only on screen as Cheetah for like 5 minutes. Okay, the climax is a scene of Genie Man standing in a tornado and screaming on live television for 5 minutes. It really does not matter what is said in this scene. Everyone in the world starts making wishes and creating chaos everywhere. But Diana convinces everyone to take them back. Genie Man apologizes and runs home to his son, and Wonder Woman can apparently fly now. Why? Shut up. Because truth. Or whatever. The end. Here's a truth for you. This movie is dumb. The reason I think the first Wonder Woman was so great was because not only was it a movie empowering women, but it was a superhero origin story that told just as well as any Marvel movie. But now that we've covered all that stuff, what is there left to explore in a second movie? The only reason I can think of that this movie should exist is to act as an origin story for Cheetah, but like I said, that part was probably the lamest. Wobo 8-4 is a 6 out of 10 whatever movie. At least I didn't hate it. Mulan 2020 is a movie that pretty much every critic was unified in thinking was a terrible disservice to everything that made Mulan the classic it is. And the fact that Disney tried to charge extra for Disney Plus users to watch it didn't exactly help their ratings. It's only the most recent in the long line of live-action remakes Disney has been vomiting out, each getting progressively worse and worse. I had nothing but low expectations for Mulan 2020, and after some time had passed after the movie's release, and after it became free to watch on Disney Plus, I decided to give it a watch myself to see how bad it really was. I expected it to be full of as much awful acting as The Lion King, as much bad CGI as Beauty and the Beast, and as much Will Smith as Aladdin. I fully expected to be so bored by this movie that I booted up Overcooked 2 on my Nintendo Switch and intended to play that while I listened to the movie in the background. And then I actually watched the thing and, well, you know what? I like this movie. There, I said it. I like Mulan 2020. Not only did this movie exceed my impossibly low expectations for a Mulan remake, in my opinion one of the best Disney Renaissance movies, but I'm sure it would have satisfied my expectations for any movie. Now I don't want to go too far and say it's a masterpiece or a perfect adaptation or something, because there are many problems that I can see people getting hung up over, but for the most part I don't really understand why people are calling this the worst Disney remake so far. I mean guys, that's clearly Aladdin. So for this review I don't think I need to tell you the plot since it's just a remake of Mulan, a movie that everyone has seen. Right? Right? So instead I'll just tell you some of the things they altered and why I actually don't hate those decisions. The first big change made to this remake that I wanted to mention is the addition of this witch bird lady. She's a witch who can turn into a bird. Or like a bunch of birds. And that's it. But basically her purpose in the story is to act as like a contrast to Mulan. Both her and Mulan, as the witch lady says in the movie, were self-empowering women who prove themselves to be competent fighters, yet all the men around them still don't accept them. Only the bird lady let her anger drive her to the wrong side. And while she definitely wasn't necessary, her addition I like because it adds that element of the hero seeing herself in the enemy, and a member of the enemy team realizing they're on the wrong side. And in the end, the bird lady does end up taking an arrow to save Mulan, even though she doesn't really need to. I mean, she could have just simply hit the arrow out of the way, or used her magic to stop it, or turn into a flock of birds to block its path, or heck, Mulan could have just dodged it herself. But I can look past that. Second is their choice to give the live-action remake a more gritty and serious tone to fit the change in medium, which, oh my god, they should have done for Aladdin. This movie would have been so much worse if they had tried to pull off all the jokes and god forbid the songs that they did in the animated version. One change I found odd was the decision to cut Shang Li, because in the original he was, you know, the serious one who trained Mulan and was ultimately the one whose opinion of her Mulan cared about the most. But I don't think him not being there makes it any worse. Third, the action scenes they added in were just so damn good. I don't think they detracted from the tone at all, considering there were really no fight scenes in the original. As expected, there are a few things that just simply don't work in a live-action film, but certain things a movie like this should have. And I don't think it would have been good if they opted for a shot-for-shot remake like The Lion King. All that being said, though, here are some of the bad changes. Mainly, they either just cut or changed a bunch of key scenes from the original that I don't really understand why they did. One was the scene where Mulan suits up to get ready to go to battle and gives herself a haircut with a sword, and upon her departure, her father runs after her in the rain and falls down with a flower in his hand. That scene in the animated movie, marking the beginning of Mulan's heroic journey, was just so powerful. But in the live-action movie, they kinda just cut that part and instead just cut to her stealing the armor and riding away. Another was the scene right after A Girl Worth Fighting For, where the song abruptly ends and the men come upon the burning wasteland that Genghis Khan left in his wake. That scene was also really powerful, because seeing the sudden shift in emotion on the men's faces as they were marching along and singing is staggering. In this movie, though, they kind of just cut to that part from a previous unrelated scene without any transition, and as a result, it feels like, well, something should have gone in the middle. But other than that, I overall liked this remake. They certainly did a better job on this one than on the Blue Will Smith movie. Something about the way this one was shot made it seem much more real as well. Mulan 2020 gets a 7 out of 10. Closer to a 6 than an 8, but I wanted to make it very clear that this is better than Onward. Tenet is spelled the same forwards and backwards. What a clever title, 10 out of 10. This movie is a huge mindf***, let me tell you. But it's not just a mindf*** for the sake of being a mindf***, and instead incorporates its mindf***ness into the larger story as a storytelling tool. That has to be the most times I've ever used the word mindf*** in one sentence. In addition to being a mindf***, Race Car is also the very first Christopher Nolan movie I've ever seen. Call me uncultured if you want, and yes, that means I've never seen Inception, so I don't have that to compare this to. From all the things I've heard that Nolan likes to put into his movies, all of them in this movie were cranked up times 10. Lots of hard-to-hear dialogue.
What do you know about opera? Terminal. From their private planes.
Clunky exposition and other stuff that I'm not exactly qualified to talk about because I've only seen one Nolan film. So Kayak is about a protagonist named, well, I'll think of something later, but for now let's just call him the protagonist. The protagonist is a secret spy agent that belongs to an organization called Rotator. The main gimmick of this movie is that scientists have found a way to invert some objects and even people. What that means is that they can cause those objects or people to travel backwards in time while the rest of the world moves forward, which means that if a bullet is inverted, you can shoot a gun and catch the bullet instead of shooting it. I wouldn't exactly call this time travel because they're not really transporting from one time to the other. It's more like they're just making time go in a different direction, if that makes any sense. The main conflict of Madam My Madam is that the protagonist has to stop this Russian guy from ending the world. I didn't completely follow that part of the movie with all the spy lingo and whatnot, but enough about that boring stuff. Let's get to the action! The action scenes in this movie are some of the coolest I've ever seen in any film. Very few movies actually cause me to gasp out loud or say, whoa, it's something. On the surface, you might think that just seeing something go backwards isn't the most cool looking thing in the world, but they do manage to use it in different ways than just showing something moving backwards. Instead, there are nice subtle little things, like an upturned car shaking around as an indication that it's about to fly into the air in reverse, or a bullet hole in a pane of glass to foreshadow that someone's about to fire a reverse bullet. And for some of the scenes, you can even see both the forward and reverse iterations of the same event. The first time from the perspective of the forward protagonist, and the second time from the perspective of the inverted one. For example, early on in the movie, the protagonist encounters a masked guy who he starts fighting, but it's suggested that the guy he's fighting is actually traveling in reverse. And later, when the protagonist inverts himself and starts traveling back towards the beginning of the movie, he runs into the forward version of himself and realizes it was actually the inverted version of himself he was fighting all along. As for the story outside of the epic action, it's also pretty good. Like I said, I had a harder time following it than if I was an adult who this movie was probably intended for, but the thing with the Russian guy who abuses his wife and doesn't let her see her son, and he has the ability to end the world, I understood enough to make me care about what was going on. A Man, a Plan, a Canal, Panama gets an 8 out of 10, and I highly recommend it to anyone who likes being confused, but in a good way. I never thought Phineas and Ferb would make it onto my best movie of the year podium, but here we are. I think it goes without being said that Candace Against the Universe is nowhere even close to the level that Across the Second Dimension was on. Nevertheless, conjunctive adverb, I love this movie so much. It's got everything the first movie did, but it just isn't done quite as well. I will say that I got kind of tired of Doof's voice and how none of his jokes were really that funny, and just a few too many of the jokes relied on breaking the fourth wall. But other than that, I think this movie does a great job of capturing exactly what made every episode of the TV show special, and adding in just the right amount of emotional bits in there. The first thing you'll notice about the actual story of Candace Against the Universe is that it's practically identical to the Queen of Mars episode, where Candace travels to another planet by accident, but decides she wants to stay there because she thinks no one on Earth appreciates her. But if you ignore that and treat this movie as its own thing, which I did, then you can enjoy it. Let's see, the songs were really good. My favorite was Adult. I was surprised at how serious I was able to take the movie when it stopped for an emotional break, unlike some other movies. One thing I definitely changed about the movie is adding a few more minutes to the climax, because I feel like the chase through the city was just a little bit underwhelming and didn't do justice to all the epic stuff they did to get to this point. I would have written in something like the chicken replacinator goes flying out of Candace's hand, and maybe Perry has to go get it while everyone else distracts the monster, I don't know. But yeah, the unfinished feeling the climax gave me is the only real issue I have with this movie, and I know you're thinking I just listed nothing but negatives about the movie, and you're right, but I don't think I really need to talk that much about the positives, because it's just as funny and clever as any other episode of Phineas and Ferb, really. And it explores a great arc with Candace for a change. If you like Second Dimension, then you'll like this. 8 out of 10. And that means there's only one movie left. Drumroll, please. Soul. It's the best thing ever. It's perfect. I don't know what else to say. It's perfect. Like, I literally have no complaints about it. Everything, and I mean everything, about this movie, from the character writing, to the story writing, to the setting establishments, to the humor, to the animation, was done pretty much flawlessly. And the added relatability of the main character Joe being a middle school band teacher only made me more interested, because every band kid can tell you that this movie captures middle school band perfectly. Seriously, you need to see this movie if you haven't already, so I'm giving one final spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1, okay, let's continue. Everything I wanted and hoped for in a Pixar movie from Onward that I didn't get, Soul well made up for. Soul is about Joe Gardner, who is stuck in his job as a band teacher but wants to get this important gig with a famous jazz players quartet, but his family wants him to just settle down and stop trying to chase his wild dreams. And the movie gets going right after he gets the gig, but then promptly falls into a manhole and dies. But before his soul can get sucked into the great beyond, he jumps off the moving sidewalk and falls into the great before, which is the place where souls get their personalities before they go to Earth. Now, there are so many things to see in this place, this soul world as I'm going to be calling it, that are representative of so many different things, similar to how Inside Out had places like long-term memory and the subconscious as physical places. In Soul World, you have places where souls can walk through like a car wash and come out the other side with a new personality trait. There's the Hall of Everything, where souls go to try and find their spark, which is the thing that makes the soul complete and allows it to go to Earth. There is the Zone, which is a place in Soul World where people's minds go when they get really focused on something. Like when, say, someone gets really into playing piano, their souls get transported physically to the Zone. And among the souls in the Zone are lost souls, people who have put too much of themselves into their work and have become essentially soulless. I absolutely adore the clever way they represent all these ideas as literal things in Soul World. But outside of the Soul World, the scenes on Earth carry so much as well. 22, the Tina Fey soul character who doesn't want to go to Earth but is ultimately forced to, accidentally falls into Joe's body, and Joe's soul falls into a cat. This makes for both funny shenanigans and great character moments when Joe discovers more about himself, his friends, and his family simply by watching someone else act a different way in his body. This to me was such a clever thing to do, like everything in Soul is so clever. And 22 discovers discovering the wonders of Earth through Joe's body is genuinely great. The climax, while lacking a certain something that the other Pixar movies' climaxes have had, still completed Joe's and 22's arcs beautifully. With Joe confronting 22 in a black sandstorm and presenting the seed thingy as a representation of what 22 discovered on Earth. The one thing I would change, but this didn't make the movie bad, this would just make it better, would be tacking on maybe 1 more minute to the end, showing Joe actually living his life on Earth like he said he would, and maybe even showing what happens to 22, I don't know. That would just be the perfect ending, but you know, I'm not mad at the movie ending with a vague line to make you think. Would watch 1,000,000 times over Onward. Soul gets a perfect 10 out of 10. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was technically the bottom 10 movies of the year. These all suck. I am by no means someone whose opinion on a movie you should let make or break your decision to see it. It's quite possible I have no idea what I'm talking about. I just watch movies for fun, and the fact that I only saw 10 of them this year says something about how much I care. I'm thinking of seeing Croods 2, which I've heard is quite good, but I wasn't about to watch it to try and include it in this list before 2020 ended. So I guess this is the end of the video. Thanks for watching all the way through, and listening to me talk about these god-awful movies. Comment below, hyped for Trolls 3, if you watched all the way to this point, as my way of knowing. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you later. Bye.